Today's topic is internal communications, and specifically content strategy for employee communications. We are really fortunate today to be joined by my friend, Stephanie Joranson, who is joining us from Minneapolis, Minnesota today. Steph is the Director of Internal Communications at global medical technology leader, Medtronic. And in Steph's role, she leads the company's employee communications strategy and is focused on driving understanding of Medtronic's business strategy and priorities among employees globally. She joined Medtronic in 2016, and since that time has launched a new all-employee global intranet that brings together Medtronic's more than 90,000 employees across 160 countries. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But prior to Medtronic, Steph spent about a decade at Weber Shandwick, where she was a member of the global employee communications and change management practice that is now United Minds Consultancy. And prior to this, she was on the comms team for Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty. And before that was the Deputy Communications Director for the Minnesota Department of Education. So welcome, Steph.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you to you and all the our Borshoff friends for the invitation, and really looking forward to talking internal comms, particularly content strategy. And hopefully we can have a discussion and we don't have to listen to my voice for the full straight hour. I don't think anyone needs that, but I'm really excited to kind of start a dialogue and share some of my thoughts. And I know I've got some of my teammates, folks on the internal comms team in corporate communications at Medtronic on the line. So may shout out to a couple of them. A lot of the work that we did at Medtronic in the last few years has been a massive effort, blood, sweat, and tears by so many more people. I'm just here to represent and be the spokesperson for a fantastic team. So thank you, Borshoff and Meg, for the invitation, and look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And hello to everybody from Indy, Minneapolis, Chicago, Atlanta. I think we've got it covered there. And so let's get right into it, Steph. I do want to talk about your effort to launch this intranet for nearly 100,000 people, right? This is to me, just a staggering number of human beings, right? And so not only do you have the challenge in that task of reaching different roles, geographies, languages, culture, but also balancing this priority to deliver on the expectation of employees of meaningful, engaging, effective content. So talk to us a little bit about that. What were the foundational things that drove your strategy with this challenge to launch the new intranet?
Sure. Well, that's a big question with a lot of details, and I'll just kind of skim and dive in deep to any one in particular that folks want to talk about. But I think just to start, an intranet, I'm not going to lie, we did spend a decent amount of money, and not everybody has massive budgets to invest. But I think the first and most important part of the project for us, when we were thinking about how do we really truly build a place that all employees can access and that all employees can engage with and really become an informed workforce, it started with the top. So we have a chief communications officer that very much values internal communications and what that function can really bring to the organization. And so I'm hoping that every one of you on the line has a chief fill in the blank that really gets it. And that's a huge starting point. And then of course, with the recent times in COVID, I've truly never felt that internal communications has been more valued than it does today. Now is our big moment in internal comms. And that's, I'll make my little plug right off the bat, Meg, for what you're got, a future Shoff Chat to be what do we do now in a COVID world, a post-COVID world, now that internal communications has been elevated in such new and significant ways? What's our opportunity, and what do we do moving forward? But so looking back, we everyone's got their own unique story. Ours at Medtronic is that we acquired essentially an equally sized med tech firm, probably the second largest in the world, and was the largest acquisition in medtech history when we acquired Covidian, a company based out of Galway, Ireland. And so that became a technical challenge to bring to essentially double our workforce. And so we knew that we needed to build a new intranet that really reaches across our entire global and diverse workforce. So a lot went into that from a, of course, technical side, but just to hone in on the content piece, we had some really important guiding principles that we followed, and I'll touch on 3 of them. There were probably 10, but 3 of them were that, everything that we do and all the decisions we make, we wanted to be grounded in data. And so we did kick off this work with some research and establishing a data set that we can ground our decision making in. And then the second is that, we're a global organization, and we needed our content and our intranet to really reflect that. If any of you have, like us, we are a global organization, but 60% of our workforce is in the United States. And so we have a tendency to be a little bit US centric. That's kind of our American way, right? And so we continue to push ourselves today, and we're 2 years and some change post launch of our intranet, and we are constantly every day saying, is this really relevant OUS? And so truly global is the kind of second really important guiding principle for us. And then employee-centric, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but that was another important guiding principle, that we needed to have our content for internal be really centered on the audience. I know it sounds surprising to say that, or not surprising, or pretty basic, but we were starting off in a position where we didn't create content from an employee communications perspective. We sort of took what we had and pushed it out to employees. So that really meant a transformation in internal communications to say, actually, employee content is a priority. And what that means is we are going to have to build a team and build a content strategy and build an editorial approach that is centered around curating content with kind of 3 other things in mind. What makes content unique to employees is, to us, the tone. So we're not just going to be the formal, big medical technology company out to our customers. We have a very particular tone externally. Internally, we're going to look to be more conversational, more personal. We're going to speak to employees directly. We want to the second thing is building a culture. It's the show, not tell model that hopefully is simple enough for us all to kind of rally behind. We can, really demonstrate to our people what we need from them. And then the third is the objective. And this sounds, again, kind of basic, but when we're creating our own content for employees, we really have to look at what are we trying to accomplish. So when we create, and I was just telling Meg this before everyone else got on, when we create content for our customers, there's a really clear objective. We are at the end of the day trying to sell medical devices, but we're not trying to sell an insulin pump to employees. And so what is our objective, and how do we translate our business strategy and really make that meaningful for employees? And so that's kind of what we center our content around it. And so those are just some of the philosophies. I don't know, Meg, if it would be helpful to get into kind of the key components or elements of a content strategy, again, all in the Steph Joranson, school of thought. But
yeah, I think so. And if I'm familiar with the Steph Joranson school of thought, you like to break things into threes.
Yes, I have a.
So
I do have a
go ahead and
tendency for
share.
that.
And I'm also interested for people in the chat, a couple of things. Number one, if your organization actually has a formal dedicated intranet, right? And then number two, what Steph is talking about, is there a focused effort on a different tone that your content to employee takes than your overall kind of tone and brand persona? Interested if people can either put that in the chat or maybe raise your hand as Steph is talking us through these. What are those essential components to a content strategy?
Definitely. And I told my team this yesterday that they're going to hear me on my soapbox like they do every other day. So here goes, guys. So we've been talking a lot about this, and just for a brief moment, just to set the context. I think I've been setting the context a little bit, but I think it's worth talking about where we've been so that it's clear why we are where we are. I know many on the line are probably further along this journey than we are, and some may be behind us, but all together, I would say when I came to Medtronic 4 years ago, we didn't really have an internal communications function. We absolutely did not have an internal communications strategy. We were nowhere near creating content for employees, and we had completely fragmented approach to internal comms. And so we had to do a lot of cleanup, and we had to kind of wipe the slate clean and start over. And so this is just kind of part of the journey, I would say, in terms of learning while we go and trying to figure out what works really best for our workforce. And then another bit of context is like Meg said, we have a really diverse employee population, and that doesn't just include kind of geography diversity. It includes and language, but it includes everywhere from people not even knowing if they have a Medtronic email address to people who definitely do not have a Medtronic office that they're really necessarily tied to. They're on the road all the time. They're in hospitals. They probably feel more connected to their hospital system that they're selling the devices in than they do a Medtronic office. We've got your standard desk workers. We've got manufacturing, which are very, very hard to reach. That's probably a whole nother Shoff Chat too. And so, we still have a long way to go. But kind of going back to your question, Meg, on how we think about content strategy, it's really in three parts. Shocker. And the first is, we need to understand what our company priorities are, what our leaders, see as the priorities of the day or of the fiscal year, if you will, and really getting a very clear understanding of what our leaders' vision is for the organization, so that we can really translate that to employees in a way that puts us all on the same path and headed in the same direction. So that leader perspective is really critical, but it's only one part of the three-legged stool. You knew I couldn't go talking content strategy without referencing said stool, but the second part, and this is the one that is nearest and dearest to me and my team, I'll speak on behalf of us, that is most important, is the employee. So what do they want to hear? What do they want to know? And we can study their behaviors, and I can talk a little bit more about data and some ways to capture data in a little bit. But so really putting employees at the center of that. What are they willing? You know, we can talk leader speak all day long, but if they're not going to hear it and consume it and engage with it, then it's sort of pointless. And then we, of course, lay over the third component being our communication strategy and how we deliver all of these messages, which is just as important as the other pieces, because without that, you know, that leadership vision doesn't go anywhere. And so that's that delivery mechanism and the communications strategy that we put over that is the third kind of leg of that stool.
Yeah, and also for everyone, we're going to be sharing some resources that Steph is referring to in her email recap. So, but I also want to address some of the comments. We've been getting a couple of interesting comments about formal intranet, use of kind of this two-way social, enterprise social media. Amberly, who's joining us from Roche, is saying that they're actually in the process of decentralizing their intranet. So kind of a different approach there. And then other folks talking about kind of how they are evolving their intranet during this time, realizing that perhaps their current approach is not sufficient during this very unique time. Adam is saying we moved to an interactive social media style to internet to encourage dialogue and a less formal conversation. We have someone mentioning Yammer, which I know is growing in popularity. Steph, I know we might talk about that here in a little bit. So lots of different kind of thoughts on how to evolve the use of some tools and the approach of the intranet. We also use Teams. Kat here at Borshoff is kind of our de facto intranet. And then we do have a question here, Steph, about non-desk wireless employees and how to reach those. That's very, you know, we see that in the agency environment all the time, the challenges of reaching and engaging those employees. So if you have thoughts there, and how are you addressing multiple languages is a question from Doja. Lots of questions.
Just some softballs. Thanks, guys. Super easy to answer. Honestly, if anyone has the manufacturing or non-wired, non-desk, however you refer to that massively important audience, would love to hear it, because that's the $1 million question. We, you know, that's been one of those what keeps you up at night moments or questions is how to get at those folks. But honestly, I'm remembering back to a project I did at Weber Shandwick for one of our clients who had so many employees. They're a massive retailer, and so going out into their retail locations and having, you know, focus groups and talking to those employees, I just have to remember what I heard there, and that is those folks don't they don't want the same information that your desk employee does. They don't consume it in the same way, and they don't need their needs are just really different. And so I think we have a long way to go on really understanding that particular segment. But COVID, as it has for us in significant ways, and I'm guessing every single person on this line saw that their organization did shocking things and mind-boggling at mind-boggling speed. And so we had to find a way. We had to absolutely find a way to reach our non-wired employees, because they were the ones being asked to still go in every single day. I remember we had to equip them with at the very beginning, we had to equip them with a letter that they could print out and put in their car in case they got pulled over and were asked, where are you going? And they can say, I'm going to Medtronic because they create life-saving devices. And we had to get this information into their hands. And so basic. This is not fancy. This is not technical. What's our best way in? And it's through the managers. It's through the site leaders. It's through the manufacturing, folks that run those particular operations. And so that became an urgent need to get information into their hands so that they can share with their manufacturing employees. Because for us, there wasn't a consistent, well, let's just push it through XYZ technology. Every manufacturing site, unfortunately, has very inconsistent communications technology infrastructure. And so there wasn't just a simple way to be like, okay, these three things are how we reach them directly. Unfortunately, we have to use that leadership within sitting in those sites that understand the best way to reach their people, because they do that on the regular much more than we do at the corporate center. And so we really rely on that. And then we are looking at Yammer as a way to break down the walls. And I love Yammer because it gives everyone an equal playing field. Everyone's voice can be heard in that space. And we have a long way to go on Yammer, but we are starting, and that's hopefully going to be an opportunity for us to kind of reach down into the depths of the organization to be able to deliver important information that they're looking for, more in that segmented way.
So Steph, I'm seeing two kind of comments in the chat that I want to address. Number one, you have 160 countries, right? How do you make decisions relative to translations, and how does that process work for you?
Well, we are very lucky because we have a massive comms team. I know that probably hurts a little to hear from some folks who have to do it scrappy, which I, coming from an agency, obviously saw much more on the scrappy side than the well-staffed side. That's why we were there. And so translations, we've been lucky to be able to say, can't do it at the corporate center. However, we have communications teams that are embedded within each of our regions. And so we have a communicator in many of the countries in Europe. We have a comms team in our Asia Pacific region. We have a comms team within Greater China. That's one of our regions, as well as the Americas, which covers Canada, which shouldn't be so hard, but they have that damn law where you have to translate legally into French Canadian, and then LATAM. And so we're able to partner with them to make sure that the content that we're creating can be leveraged in that native language. I will say we are a English speaking company, if you will, and that is a sort of the expectation. Now we know that that's not reasonable all the way into, especially we've got massive operations in Puerto Rico and in Mexico, where Spanish is it, and that's just what it is. And so we do, rely on our local communicators to make sure that those folks are getting the information in their native language, and that we're abiding by the laws of different countries and making sure that the critical HR content, for example, is making its way to those folks. But it's definitely tough. It's very tough. The other thing that we are looking to for the future, and maybe others have done this, is, and this is still fuzzy, so we need to explore it, but Yammer does offer translation. So you can see and experience Yammer in your native language. So I can be posting in English because I'm so American and that's what we do. And then you know, if you're sitting in Mexico, you can have, you can just have it default set to your, you know, to Spanish, and you can be consuming what I'm and anyone else is posting, which is something we're hoping becomes a big opportunity.
Yep, and I think we'll touch on Yammer even a little bit more later on. But speaking of Canada, I think one of our favorite Canadians has a really interesting question, Steph, which is, you know, you mentioned trying not to be US-centric in your communications. However, recent events over the last couple of months, you know, in the news, I know your huge operation there in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is where a lot of the recent racial injustice crisis things are going on. So how are you approaching this from an internal comms priority standpoint for those folks in the US and especially those folks in your Minneapolis location?
Yeah, that's it's like we're all moving so fast that when you pause and think about what happened on May 25th, it's still jarring. So apologies, but it is hard to separate, especially when it's hitting you right in the face in your own community, to say, how do we make sure we're not over or under indexing on any particular topic, and this being one. And so I'll just kind of speak tactically to what we did and what we are doing. And this is an area I'm super interested in kind of learning what other companies are doing for sure. But our operational headquarters is based in Minneapolis. And so we use that sometimes to kind of lean on as rationale for occasionally communicating a little bit more heavily, especially in the George Floyd situation. I mean, honestly, that we told ourselves this is a global conversation at a minimum, and this is absolutely affecting people globally. So, you know, some of this is a bit of convincing yourself, but the most important part of all of that is it gave us an opportunity to remind our people in Minneapolis or anywhere who we are, what our values are, what we stand for, and what we don't tolerate. And we've been having that conversation ever since, and we are not going to stop having that conversation. And so as it relates to content, sure, it originated here in the US. Sure, it originated in Minneapolis, but it's a value and a topic that is a massive, massive priority for us. And so, so we'll be, you know, more or less having that conversation from here on out.
Absolutely. And I was thinking, Steph, you know, you have your editorial calendar, right? You have your data-driven content strategy, but then there are moments that require and demand that you just be human and focus on those values. So I think what you're talking about is a good example of that. Another comment that I wanted to touch on, which helps lead us into our next topic, is about data, right? Lisa's talking about conducting focus groups with their manufacturing employees to learn about what their deskless or non-wired workforce and what kind of information and how they prefer to receive it. So that's great data. I also just want to talk broadly about the importance of data. Steph, you talked about that at the very beginning. And I think for everyone on, you know, in a perfect world, we would all have these huge volumes of research, right? Focus groups data, survey research. And Steph, you were talking a little bit about the efforts that Medtronic took at the beginning of your intranet refresh, but not everybody has that data, right? Not everybody is there yet. So talk a little bit about the importance of data, but also just kind of, like you said, getting scrappy and using what you've got. What if folks, what's your advice for folks that may not have as sophisticated a capability as Medtronic did in this process?
Sure. So first, easiest, freest, your audience are employees. And the cool thing is they sit right inside your organization. They are a finite group of people. They're not vague. They're human individuals going out to, capture audience insights and data from your customers. That's a little harder, right? Like that costs a lot of money. We spend a lot of money on that from our corporate marketing side. So there is free data, and hopefully everyone is like, yeah, we know, like we already have that. But there's free data sitting right inside your HR team right now, today, and it's meaningful. So first thing, don't discount the demographics. And that's a big one that we were able to pull at the start of our intranet project or during it. And we're doing another pull now of basically the breakdown of who they are, where they sit, what language they speak, what's the breakdown of percentage of folks that are in a manufacturing role, that are in a sales role, that are in a business or corporate role. So we can break down all this data. Do they sit in a function? Do they sit in a business or a region? And right there, that gives you ammunition to say, well, in reality, X, I'm making this up. Well, I'll not make this up. 60% of our employees sit in the US. That gives us a little bit of authority to say that maybe to Cam's point, you might see a little bit more indexing on US in our communications than not. Little bit. That's 60%. If it were 80 or 90, you could scale. And so I think just that demographic data and breaking that down and really understanding who our people are is gold. And that's free, and it's right in the HR department. Hopefully that's something that everyone can take advantage of. The other thing that I think is pretty basic that we use every day, every single day. I'm like looking at some of the names here, people that are on my team, and these are the guys who are like literally in our data studying it daily, is your analytics. Now, if you're using Yammer as your main, let's say main employee communications channel, free analytics right in there. If you have a SharePoint site, throw a Google Analytics, free. We use Adobe Analytics, and unless you have like a PhD in analytics and data and research, it's a little hard. But I've got brilliant people on my team that are just like, this is really critical. So we can understand and break down, how does our content perform? Who's looking at it? How many people are viewing what we're putting out there? How many people are engaging with it? We've gone a little bit further and started to develop an engagement score, which sort of evens the playing field for all of our metrics, which include views, comments, likes, shares. And so you can, that's something that we've kind of a phase 2 of our measurement program. But I would say that's another awesome thing to do, and can be a little bit harder to get your leaders to pay attention to what that represents. But there's some kind of easy ways to describe it. And so those are a couple things that are just pretty standard out of the gate that hopefully aren't too difficult. But, you know, we leverage those two things to make decisions on a daily basis. We you know, Aaron on the team, and Conlon, they pulled together a monthly dashboard. It's very pretty. I'm very proud of it. And we take that to our leaders to really say, guys, this stuff that you're asking us to do, it's not working. But employees are really clearly engaging and looking for this type of thing. And so we study that on a regular basis, kind of ongoing. And of course, like, primary research is great. Even though we've got a big investment in internal communications, it's still been a little bit of start and stop with primary research. And so, you know, I have a big philosophy on what that can and should look like, and have a whole plan developed and just ready to execute on it. But haven't done that since pre-intranet launch. A couple other just ideas, and I'm sure others have it too. So if you have ideas in the, throw it in the chat, because I'm sure mine are not comprehensive, but we do an engagement survey. We've tried everything. Even in my 4 short years at Medtronic, we've done an annual every employee, we're, you know, trying to get to take the survey. We moved to quarterly pulse, and now we're at twice a year, trying to hit all of employees, kind of going back a little more to the original way of doing it. And so those are really meaningful as well. They're not perfectly hitting what I want to know from a comms perspective, but at least we can get an understanding of culture, sentiment, and, you know, some of those measures that your HR team might be asking for. So I've gotten that data, and I've partnered. That was one of the first things I did, is I called up my research partner on our HR team and said, sign me up. I need to see the dashboard. And so she helps kind of curate for me the most meaningful metrics within that employee survey, just to, again, round out what we know, what we can know, and how we can really use that to drive our strategy, course correct our strategy, and make decisions on content.
Yeah, absolutely, Steph. A couple of really good comments or questions here in the chat. One from Jason. Hi, Jason is talking about how critical data is for our kind of profession and practice, that internal comms folks tend to bring words and pictures. Marketing gets these resources and budgets and priorities. Why? Because marketing has data, and internal comms just gets pats on the back. So totally. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Jason, and the data, using data to prove our worth is kind of the path forward.
Totally agree.
And then one other question, Cam has another good question here, but Steph, do you rely on any external resources? You talk about, yes, it'd be great to do all this original research, and everybody has some data right in their organization, but, you know, all the time, we look at that huge, massive Gartner study. I think it was from 2011 or 2012, you know, biggest employee study globally. Any resources that you turn to like that are available to, you know, literally anybody?
Gartner is you know, we pay for Gartner so that we can access everything, literally everything that they have to offer. And so, and that's something that we leverage across, not just, I mean, they have, for a while, like when I first discovered Gartner years ago, I was like, and it was maybe CEB at the time, I thought it was just an internal communications resource because it was there's so much there. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, they have that same body of research and support and templates and all these different things across everything that are, you know, global communications and marketing and digital teams. So that is in a lot of ways gold. I think that what they have is incredible. You know, from there it gets a little harder and it's sort of, you know, scrappy, but you know, we are blessed with our chief communications officer having, you know, he's on the Page Society. And so we get a lot of, you know, good info from Page. And then he also sits on the, I think that he's, you know, a chair or one of the board members for IPR. And so, but IPR does put out a lot of good internal comms studies and that kind of thing. And so we've leveraged those as well. Honestly, there was one IPR study that was just free that I basically, you know, read, lined and highlighted and leveraged the heck out of that for a lot of the rationale as to why we needed to do what we needed to do when we were transforming our internal comms function. So, you know, sometimes you just find that gold out there. And we, again, have the luxury of having a couple agency partners. We're rebranding right now. And so we've got access to data from those efforts. So I almost I just look around and see who's getting the stuff and the goods and how can I either get in on the front end and get some of the stuff that I need included in those efforts, or you know, just kind of grabbing and pulling from anywhere that's already happening. If the, you know, doing your own primary research is kind of out of the budget and out of scope. That cannot be exhaustive. So I'd love to know what other folks are doing in terms of that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm thinking, I think we have time for one more question, Steph, but because we're having such good interaction here in the chat, that as our follow-up, I think we could publish the transcript and share it for everybody to see. Everybody, I know we haven't been able to address every single comment, so we'll plan to do that. But I think we have time for one more question. We're right at about 46 minutes, and we like to keep it to about an hour. So last kind of question, we've touched on this a little bit already, Steph, but the importance of employee-centric communications. So we've all kind of talked about or seen this trend of highly customized, and the expectation of employees of customized communications, sometimes down to the individual, right? And the rise of things like stuff we've seen in the chat, the two-way social comms platforms, Yammer, et cetera. These are all effective, right, in employee, you know, getting higher engagement. But talk to us about how at Medtronic, huge organization, right? We've already talked about those challenges. How do you keep employees at the center of your content?
Yeah, so the most basic way, and then we can talk a little bit more detail, but the most basic way is anytime you're being asked to communicate anything, start with an employee story. Lead with, and this goes back to the show, not tell. Now this is so obvious, but you know, you have a company initiative. We're looking to, for us, we were doing something called a free cash flow challenge, for example. Now, nobody cares about that, right? So how boring to talk about a financial metric. And so we had to get creative to think about, okay, we actually have a call to action, so that's good. We have we have an incentive, the what's in it for me, the thing that we all talk about all the time. You know, if we free our cash, if we all can contribute to freeing our cash, then we're going to have a financial benefit at the end of the year. And then, you know, real life examples of people doing that. So showing and not just telling, do this, cut costs, look at your expenses, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about, you know, Jason, who did X, Y, and Z. And so we do that for every single story, and we cover so many different topics, but we try to do that without, you know, square peg, round hole, but everywhere that it makes sense. And I would say it's probably, keep me honest, Aaron and Shannon, probably like 90% of our stories, I would say, have an employee at the center of our content. I don't need to tell them. Like my writer, she's amazing. I stole her from the Minneapolis St. Paul Business Journal, but she doesn't need to tell them. Our peers need to tell us. We need to demonstrate, like, who am I to say do XYZ employee because it's, going to advance our business strategy. And so that's why it's not just, hey, it's nice to see a fellow employee. And I can see myself in that story. It's not just that, but it's just good for business because we can really show and demonstrate when we say we need our employees to, advance this, part of our business strategy. It's just frankly easier to demonstrate that through, real life examples and real people. And then the other thing about employee centered and this, so that's kind of how we do it for our content. But, we also need to think about how we reach our people and not just our little corporate bubble, which is easy to sit and do. So that's why we're starting to think, we know that a SharePoint, our intranet is built on SharePoint. It's, it's in the cloud, it's on, SharePoint Online. So every one of our employees can access it, but they don't because why, I'm on a manufacturing line. Why do I need to do that? I'm in a distribution center. And so we're trying to think about an omni-channel approach, just like our friends in marketing talk about, and external is that omni-channel approach that, hey, we need to, we've got our kind of global intranet, that corporate world, here's what we need to share with you. But that's not enough. You need to be able to meet employees where they are. If they're sitting in certain parts of the organization, how can we deliver information to them based on their unique role, their unique geography? And so that's why we're looking more intently at Yammer. And again, we're really at the beginning of that. So that is definitely a topic that when you've got your next Shoff Chat and you've got somebody else, one of these other awesome names talking about how they're doing that, we're just soaking all of that in as well. And learning from our Microsoft MVP. Those folks are out there and are willing to talk to anyone, honestly, to share ideas. So, that's kind of, that omni-channel and reaching folks with what they uniquely care about is still just a long journey for us.
So yeah, thank you, Steph. So I think I want to bring one question up from the chat, and then we're towards the end of the hour, so we will close. So going back to Cam's question, how often do you have your CEO and or senior leadership do all hands? Meetings, calls, whatever that looks like. Hard with 90K employees, right? But how does that play out in your internal comm strategy?
Mm-hmm. Hard is putting it nicely. It is impossible to have our CEO reach all 90,000 of our employees. Doesn't happen. Are we getting closer? Not closer, it's still so far. But are we reaching more now? Thank you, COVID. I mean, honestly, there are silver linings. Silver linings of COVID is, something that we're documenting right now. But no. So our CEO does a quarterly global town hall. It's accessible online, and you can watch it. But it is not, not everybody tunes in. We've tried to create some ways to supplement and complement that effort with previews, recaps. There's a lot of schools of thought on that, and one of sometimes I think, why do a recap? You're just incentivizing people not to show up for the hour and a half. But, you know, I think we just had a CEO transition a couple of months ago. And so, you know, we tried to leverage that moment to really introduce him to the organization in that capacity. And I think that definitely helped. People really wanted to see and hear and understand. And he's, you know, going to be rolling out his business strategy and strategic priorities here soon. And what we have to do is basically give him that surround sound, because he's not going to be able to reach everyone in that format and that avenue. We need, you know, we will create content for our intranet. You know, he'll do, you know, we continue to do emails, which is, I hate. It's just so ineffective, but we do them. And so, you know, we're trying to drive people to our intranet, trying to drive people to the town hall, and minimize the, you know, tens of other things that we can do, but we do have to use more than just that channel. And then our executive committee, which others call their C-suite, definitely have their own town halls. Everyone's got a town hall. Everyone has an all hands. It's, I can't imagine sitting, you know, deeper in the organization. If you're in a region and you're in a business or even a business unit, you might have 5 that you're expected to attend. So it's not super surprising that they don't show for all of them. So I think the bottom line on that, Cam, what are you willing to interrupt people's day for? That's the question.
Yeah. Well, and thanks, Steph. We are almost at the end of the hour. So a couple of things. First of all, thank you everybody for this really robust conversation in the chat. If you want to share with us, guys that have been listening, ideas on future topics, if you want to be a future guest, reach out and let me know. And we want to make sure that these continue as a resource, a valuable resource for our network. So thank you everybody for joining. We will catch you next time.